Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Good! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown podcast with Bruce Bowen. Along with three-time NBA champion Bruce Bowen, here's ESPN.com NBA columnist Israel Gutierrez.
Welcome into another edition of the NBA Lockdown podcast with Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. The Spurs are one win away from an NBA championship.
Parker the other way, leading 70-49. Gives to Diaw, mid-block, right side to Duncan. Bose is back, goes to work on Bosch. Angles a pass to Leonard, catch and shoot three. Got it! Kawhi Leonard on the inside out from Tim Duncan. And with machine-like precision, the San Antonio Spurs have now taken a 73-49, 24-point lead.
That was Kevin Calabro on ESPN Radio. That Kawhi Leonard three put the Spurs up 73-49 in the third quarter. Just when you thought that Game 3 was something of an anomaly, an outlier, whatever you want to call it, the Spurs come back and do it a little differently in terms of shooting percentages, but the end result, very, very much the same, putting the Heat in a 3-1 hole with the Spurs winning 107-86. Bruce, after watching Game 3 and the comfort level that Spurs offense was in, did you think that it would look this easy again in Game 4 for that offense?
Sure, absolutely not, Izzy. I thought that the Miami Heat would show a little bit more fight. I thought there would be a lot more sense of urgency that they would be playing with, and that they would kind of take away some of the things that the San Antonio Spurs were able to do as far as penetration and staying in front of your man. It just seemed as if that the Miami Heat were just as discombobulated last night as they were in Game 3. So it was quite a surprise for me because, you know, there comes a little urgency whenever you lose a game in the playoffs, and that's what we've seen. We've seen the team bounce back and get things together after a loss, especially with the streak that the Miami Heat had as far as not losing consecutive games in the playoffs. So it was surprising to me, but you got to give credit to where credit is due, and what San Antonio was able to do, or what they were able to do with the simplistic game was pretty impressive.
Now, you know, normally the Heat would be able to sort of ramp up the defense, like you said, and essentially sort of take a team out of its out of its rhythm, out of its offense. And with the Spurs, it feels like they've sort of absorbed that. Mostly in Game 2, right? Because at the end of that, you saw where Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili were trying to do too much on their own, and it was sort of a reminder to them that, hey, there's only one way we win this, and that's playing the way we normally play. And it feels like, regardless of how hard the Heat plays, the Spurs have found a rhythm in attacking that, whether it be, you know, not panicking when they're doubled or just knowing where that next pass is going to be. Is this as sharp as you've seen the Spurs look against a defense that can sort of ramp it up and go, you know, crazy mode on you a little bit, the way the Heat does against a lot of teams?
Well, yeah, it is, Izzy, but at the same time, you know, it's the pressure that they put on the Miami Heat as far as not knowing exactly who's going to do what at whatever given moment. So you have equal opportunity offense in the San Antonio Spurs that's based on getting the ball to the open guy. Unlike some of the other series that the Miami Heat have been in, you knew who was going to take a shot. You knew that Paul George was going to get shots. You knew that David West was going to get shots. And then the other guys that were on the floor for Indiana, you just kind of played it accordingly. But in this situation, you don't know who's going to do what at what given time. And the way that the Spurs are moving the ball and moving their bodies from side to side, it's really hard for them to just lock in on two individuals when there are so many others that can do things.
Now, Bruce, we've talked about Kawhi Leonard a lot this year, and I think the overriding sentiment was he's there, he's capable, he's all-star level when, you know, kind of when he wants to be. You know, when he's either when he wants to be or when he's asked to be. When he's engaged, right? But you don't know if he's engaged because, you know, he figures it's time or because his coach tells. You could see him and Pop having these interactions on the sidelines and him really trying to draw the best out of Kawhi. Now, offensively, though, Now, we've seen defensively, like, he's obviously a great defender. I mean, there was that one possession against Dwayne Wade where he basically stole the ball from him 3 times in the one possession. It was pretty embarrassing for Dwayne, frankly. And but the offensive end, have you seen this out of him to where he can pretty much take what he wants offensively, whether it be a catch and shoot, whether it be a one-dribble pull-up, whether it be going all the way, or just working the offensive boards? He has every element of that offensive game available to him these last 2 games. Have you seen that sort of consistently from him this year? Did you expect anything like this? Because we talked about, hey, last year he had a pretty good, a darn good finals, 14-11. But this year it feels like, you know, if you would have replayed those first two games, that maybe he could have averaged, you know, in the 20s because that offensive game seems to be there completely for him. Has that been evident to you that this was there for him?
Well, yes, it is more about, you know, as I said before, there would be times where he'd start off a game 4 for 4 and then he'd just kind of disappear, or he would defer to Tim, Tony, or Manu. I think what was important in this series is that, you know, Coach Popovich recognized that all the respect that he was giving LeBron, not to say that now he disrespects him, but respect meaning all the space in his operating areas. In Game 2, Izzy, LeBron was spinning and doing different things, and on one particular layup, I remember seeing Kawhi Leonard between him and LeBron with so much space that Kawhi was under the basket. And so in Game 3 and 4, you saw Kawhi taking away that airspace, doing different things that he didn't do in Games 1 and 2 to really try and just meet LeBron's aggressiveness with his own aggressiveness and see where, you know, the two clashes will end up. And so what you've seen is a rejuvenated player with the prodding from the head coach saying, hey, we need you to do this in order for us to have an opportunity to win. And ever since he got to Miami, it was the focus of him coming out and being more assertive. You know, no matter if you miss a shot, one of the things about being aggressive sometimes with taking shots, you always keep the defender, you know, engaged with you. And if he doesn't get to you, there's an opportunity if you knock it down the shot, or if you drive on the individual, you can get the ball up, and next thing you know, either it goes in or someone else has a second opportunity for a rebound or something.
It's interesting with Kawhi. It just feels like he just finally recognized what he could do against his defense, and you know, and drives also, driving the basketball. You know, you don't really have a rim protector in Miami. Not even Chris Anderson, who's sort of a little bit of a shell of himself in terms of explosiveness and getting off the floor. And in Games 1 and 2, Kawhi only drove the ball 7 times, only scored 4 points. In the last 2 games, he's driven it a total of 16 times, scored 18 points on 6 of 8 shooting, and 7 free throw attempts in that stretch too. So it feels like, you know, not only is he being able to knock down that perimeter shot, like you heard in that opening clip that put the Spurs up 25, but also being able to get all the way to the rim. So basically it's a complete package of offense. I mean, the only thing he's missing is a post-up game, but, you know, when you're doing everything else within that offense, you don't need that type of post-up game there. So, you know, I think Kawhi, would you say, Bruce, Kawhi has been so far the MVP for the Spurs because of the way his play has turned the series around, or do you still think it's either Tony or Tim that are kind of standing in the forefront there for an MVP if they win this series?
I think it's Tim. I mean, the fact that he's now set the new record for double-doubles in the playoffs for just passing Magic Johnson, I think you got to look at Tim and his age and how he's transformed his style of play and his game in order to still be effective. But it's not one of those easy situations when you talk about choosing the MVP. You know, Kawhi Leonard comes out and he has such a fantastic 2 games in Miami. But it's been, I think, one component that's been consistent has been Tim from games 1, 2 to 3 and 4. So I still think it should go to Tim if it is to go to anyone.
You know, I'm with you too for different reasons. I don't think, you know, the career records or any of his, you know, his age should come into play. I just think if you just flat out, first of all, look at the numbers. I mean, he's averaging 15.8 and 10.5 rebounds, a couple of assists, in this series and shooting 59%. Kawhi Leonard, on the other hand, because of those first two games where he was something of a non-factor, he's still averaging 16.8 points, but he only averaged 9 in the first two, and 5.5 rebounds, a couple of assists, a block, almost a couple of steals, and shooting 59%. I just feel like not only so you compare those numbers and they're both pretty good. Tim's obviously his rebounding numbers are better, and when you include the fact that Tim Duncan is the reason. The interior defense of Tim is basically what allows this defense to play the way it does, all right? They're playing them differently. The Spurs are playing the Heat differently than they did last year where, they gave Dwayne and LeBron all that room and said, beat us with jump shots. And this is one thing, Bruce, that I think we should have seen coming in. Yeah, it worked for, 2-3 games in last year's playoffs, but ultimately it didn't work. Ultimately, the Spurs lost that series, and in games 6 and 7, famously lost it because, mostly in game 7, because they were giving that much room, and basically Dwayne and LeBron made them pay. So why would Popovich go back to a formula that didn't work? Yeah, they got close, but it didn't work in the end. So this year, it's a little bit different, and it's almost as if they're recognizing, the Spurs are, that it's, if LeBron has to kick it out to his help, then his help isn't as good as it was last year. Whether it be because they're a little bit older, whether it be because they're a little bit banged up, whether it be because guys aren't here like Mike Miller, instead you've got a Rashard Lewis playing essentially that role. Do you notice the difference in approach from the Spurs there in terms of the defense against LeBron? And is it essentially something where it's his help that's failing him? Because, obviously LeBron has a little bit of issues with Kawhi Leonard, and he's a great defender and all that, but he's still finding a way to get his numbers. But on drive and kicks, Bruce, the Heat have not once scored on a drive and kick in this series from LeBron James. They're 0 for 6 in that situation. Like, that's kind of what they feed off of is LeBron, getting to the rim, drawing defense, bam, kick it out, you've got an easy shot. Was it an obvious adjustment for the Spurs? Is it something a little bit more subtle that you're seeing, or is it basically Greg Popovich saying, okay, last time we dared you to beat us, you did. This time we're going to dare everybody else to beat us?
Well, it's a lot like the 2007 series where, okay, LeBron, if you want to go ahead and score all the points, go right ahead. We can close out to the others because we realize that, or I should say the Spurs realize that it's no way that you stop LeBron James, but you can limit his effectiveness, and it's a snowballing effect for the Miami Heat right now.
But they're up on him more, right? They're up on him more because before it was you can beat us with a jump shot.
Aggressive. Yes, they're being aggressive. They're trying to take away his airspace. They're making it uncomfortable so that once he drives, he has to deal with maybe one individual and with the help side coming. So, when LeBron does kick it out, and if you don't have guys that are knocking down shots, i.e. Mario Chalmers, if it's Shane Battier, if it's Norris Cole, or even Rashard Lewis at times, when they're not making shots, it makes it harder for LeBron to be, special. It makes it harder for Dwayne Wade to have driving gaps because the team that they're playing against is packing it in, and there are a bunch of bunnies that Dwayne Wade missed yesterday. And let me just say this one, Izzy. LeBron went 7 for 7 in the third quarter, and the rest of the team was 1 for 8. It's hard to understand how he can go for 19 points at one stage of the game, and there's still he wasn't getting any help, and that's been the biggest thing is that he needs to get help, and this is what I always talk about, where role players are huge for guys like LeBron James and other superstars, is that they take the pressure off of them and allow them to get easier baskets, and if you choose to cut them off or whatever, they kick it out and someone else knocks down a jump shot.
Bruce, what do you think? Is there anything that the Heat can do differently? Because if you look at it, you start to look at who's available to them in order to create offense, all right? Because if LeBron on the driving kicks isn't working. And if LeBron's scoring, he'd have to score 50 in order to even look like it's a fair contest here. Where else can they get offense from? Because, you look at the point guards, they've been bad. You look at Dwayne Wade, like you said, not only did he miss a bunch of those shots yesterday, but basically since about Game 4 of the Pacers game has looked a little bit more like the worn-down Dwayne Wade. And frankly, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because during the regular season, during this stretch, even though there's no back-to-backs, he probably would have taken one or two of these games off. He's had stretches in the regular season where he had a week off. And, yeah, he had plenty of time off in between the conference finals and the finals, but he still looks a little bit worn down. Maybe he's doing more in practice than he was in the regular season because you kind of have to. So you can't really rely on him as much as you should. It seems like the attitude or the approach to Chris Bosh should be different by Miami, because Bosh looks like, when he's playing aggressively and he looks like an option, a guy that they can go to and say, hey, give me some points, that he can give you some points. But yet he's still a guy, famously or infamously in Game 3, he only touched the ball 12 times offensively. Should they change their approach on Chris Bosh and say, hey, look, this guy has to be our second best player. He can't just be an outlet for when when LeBron has the ball or when Dwayne has the ball or when we're moving the ball. We've got to get him the ball and say, look, Chris, do something.
Yeah, that's a great option. That's a great point you bring up, because, you're not getting too much with Dwayne right now. Dwayne looks like he's hampered by something. But I think a lot of it boils down to the style of offense they have. Their offense is predicated on LeBron and Dwayne attacking the gaps or attacking and creating for others. It's not like you can necessarily say, okay, let's put Chris Bosh in that role now, we'll move forward. But this is where kind of like the motion offense really would benefit, some type of movement. And you don't see a lot of movement within Miami's offense, except when it comes to kind of like a pick and roll or a set play. So that would be good as far as trying to move him to the number 2 scorer to try to relieve or at least take off some of the pressure from LeBron.
What's confusing to me, Bruce, is, and I brought this up a little bit earlier, is why the Spurs weren't playing like this in San Antonio. It's a little bit misleading, right? You go into Miami and you think, oh, okay, well, Miami can play differently. They can play, up to their home court standards. And then all of a sudden you've got the Spurs coming out like they haven't played all series, right? Any theories as to why that is? Was it just a matter of getting a rhythm against this team, or was it, Popovich? Because it's very rare in the NBA, Bruce, when you're in dire, and you know this, when you're in a sort of a dire situation or when you're in a pressure situation, for you to hold on to the ball less, right? Most players say, okay, I need to do more, so that requires more handling of the ball, more shot attempts, more aggressiveness. Whereas the Spurs' answer is, look, touch the ball less, move the ball quicker. And it's very rare where you have that ability to rely on that and confidently say, yes, that's the problem. That's what we should do differently. And yet the Spurs, it's because of the culture they created. It's because of the offense that Popovich created, the continuity that they've had, and the trust that they have in it. Was that the problem in games 1 and 2? Were they just not trusting who they were in those situations? Because it looks so simple to them right now that it looks to the point where this almost should have been a sweep.
Well, this is the thing. When they played the game more slower, it gave Miami a chance to stay with them, and it gave Miami a chance to set their defense. But if they could pick up the pace of the offense and possibly get moving or get opportunities where you take advantage of them for the first open shot, that puts the pressure on the defense. Now you're getting more drives to the basket. You're getting more jump shots because the team's being worried about the drive. So it was more, I think, about, tweaking just a little bit, because, Izzy, in the playoffs, it's not like you can come up with a new play or a new offense, but it's all about making little adjustments. And the Spurs adjustment was speeding the game up a little bit, getting active. And I think because they picked up the pace, it allowed them to become a little more engaged in the game. And whereas you're not waiting for them to get involved, say, 3 or 4 minutes into the first quarter, they get right into it once the jump ball is happening.
All right, I want you to shower praise on two of your favorite guys here. Two guys that have made huge differences in this series. Obviously, one of them being Boris Diaw. By the way, there was this photo that was a photoshopped little ad for State Farm that I could not stop looking at yesterday. It was because they got the Cliff Paul thing, right? So it was a picture of Boris. It was a headshot of Boris with a mustache, and it said, Blorif Diaw. How can Blorif assist you? And I just couldn't stop looking at that and laughing last night. It was hilarious. But you've got Boris Diaw, right? And you've got Patty Mills. And, Patty obviously has gotten in great shape and allows him to play the style of defense that he plays, just pressure. It reminds me a little of Lindsey Hunter toward the end of his career, where he was just relentless defensively, except Patty can shoot it a little bit better and looks for his offense. So what are Boris and Patty doing to just frustrate the heck out of Miami? Because I think without those two guys, I think it's a different series. Not different in terms of Miami would be ahead, but it would be a lot more competitive.
Well, Izzy, you said it there. It's the role players, and this is the best I've seen Boris play. From the standpoint of even in Phoenix when he scored a lot, he's become more of a complete player, or I should say he's being utilized as a complete player in San Antonio. I've always known that he could create mismatch problems, but he's such a willing passer, and you're seeing the strength of all his talents that he has to offer as far as being able to score at times, shooting the ball, getting assists, rebounding. It's great to see, especially when a player like Boris, who's been in the game, for quite some time, and it was always Tony, the Frenchman that was celebrating the opportunities of championships. So now for a childhood friend of his, a fellow teammate for their national team, it's great to see him have an opportunity to compete. I mean, legitimately. I say legitimately because I didn't think they had a chance against Dallas the year that they played Dallas and Phoenix in the playoffs. So you also look at Patty Mills. You take away a guy like Gary Neal, who became erratic in his shot selection. He became hot or cold. Patty used to be a guy that would come into the game just to give you instant offense, but he worked his tail off and he got into Pop's rotation. So much confidence he gained with Pop that even when Tony was out, it was like, okay, well, we can leave Tony out a little longer because of the way that Patty Mills is playing.
You mentioned Dallas, and I kind of feel like I have to ask this because, again, it's a little shocking when you think about the fact that they had to go to a seventh game against Dallas, the fact that they were, they lost a home game against Dallas, the fact that they were down 1-0 against, just everything that first round kind of made you shake your head and say, what's happening here? When you look back, what do you see as the difference? Like, what was it in that first round about San Antonio that just sort of had them shaken a little bit?
Well, I think part of the biggest difference is that the West, you see so much of that same team, and you've gone against them 4 times throughout the season. And you kind of develop more of a familiarity with that group as compared to when you go up against a team from the East because you only play them twice a year. So once you go into the playoffs, you add another possible 6 games or even 7. You're accustomed to what they do, and there's a comfort there and things that have worked there for you. But when you go against like with Miami now, it's more of let's see what works. And once you get something that does take shape or take hold of a game plan that's beneficial to you, you just continue to move on in that direction. It's funny. Coaches have plans A, B, C, and D for different scenarios when it comes to the playoffs. So it's interesting that one of the things that the Spurs were able to do is move Boris to the starting lineup and speed the offense up. Mm-hmm. And it still didn't necessarily tinker with their bench because now Thiago will come off the bench and you're no longer playing Tim and Thiago together. You're playing Tim with a more mobile player that can do more from a standpoint of playmaking.
Let's look ahead then to Game 5. No team in the finals has come back from a 3-1 deficit before. We know that, but we also recognize that like everything we've been talking about, the Miami Heat's help isn't necessarily there. We don't know if it's even going to get any better because guys are who they are. They're either that old or that banged up or just that incapable. What adjustments, if anything? Because Spo said after the game, Eric Spoelstra, that he's going to just look under the hood and just check everything, and just everything's going to be available to him, an entirely different approach. Let's start with the defensive end for Miami. What can they do differently from the defensive end rather than just the what they're used to, which is, trap and recover and all that stuff? Is there any better way, is it flat-out switches? Do you go that route the way Dallas did sometimes, although I don't think the Heat has the same personnel to be able to do that? Is it, do you zone up somehow and really force the Spurs to take a different approach offensively? How do you see Miami having potentially a different approach in this one on the defensive end?
Well, they have to play with a sense of urgency. I mean, this is an elimination game for them. It's not where they could say it's almost like their elimination. No, this is. And, I just like to see them play hard. I like to see them play hard on the defensive end. I think sometimes, there's no talking. I was watching the game last night. I didn't see any communication on defensive end where, we talk about LeBron's ability to call out plays and things like that when he sees them coming. I just didn't see that last night. I saw the team kind of hoping that, the Spurs would miss on those shots, and it had more to do with the fact that they weren't bringing anything to the table to make them miss. It was bad, and so that's more to deal with the energy and effort of a ball club. That's not necessarily X's and O's, and I think that if you can get that part squared away, then all else falls into place.
Well, Bruce, I watched them play most of Game 3 with a sense of urgency, especially when they got down big, and pretty much all of Game 4 with sort of a sense of, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it's schematic. I think, when you look at, they trap with Chris Anderson. Chris Anderson just stands in front of in front of the defender that he's doubling, and, you've got 4 arms in front of you. You got to reach around and find ways to pass around those guys. But you do that to Manu Ginobili, I mean, he's seeing right through these guys, and he's finding the next pass. Or, Boris Diaw's making a touch pass, or Thiago Splitter, when he sees 2 people on him, is making a touch pass. I mean, that feeds into what the Spurs are doing. So it's not necessarily, you can play as hard as you want. In fact, the harder the Heat plays and the harder they come with those doubles, the more the Spurs are just sort of picking it apart. So to me, I think it has to be a schematic difference. You don't think that there should be something, an approach that should be changed for Eric Spoelstra?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's more about the schematic part of it. I think there's just so many opportunities. I think that if they stay within, the confines of what they do, I mean, the drive to the basket you saw in Game 3, there was no help. Where was the rotation? They're a team built on rotations as well, but you didn't see those rotations as Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard driving to the basket for layups. So that's why I kind of say what I do when it comes to more or less about the competition and playing with a sense of urgency, because it's not something that they can necessarily change up as far as, hey, we're gonna blitz all pick and rolls, or we're gonna do this, or they don't have time to work on that. But I think sometimes it's just a matter of guys, really getting after it and letting it all hang out, and next thing you know, things change for them, and then they start getting easier baskets on the offensive side as well due to the cause of the defense.
Do you give Miami much of a chance in Game 5 at all?
No.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break right here. I think that's the opinion of most people right there. But we're going to take a quick break right here. It's not over. History says it is, but it's not over. But what's on the line for both Miami and San Antonio this weekend in terms of legacies and in terms of big picture and player movement? We'll get into all that in just a minute.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World
The
Series.
Bowl Championship Series.
The tide has risen again, the third time in 4 years.
Your home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
I believe in my guys. If anybody can do this, it's us. And we've seen our fair share of adversity and everything, and this is adversity in all caps. So we're just going to have confidence in ourselves. And if a guy has a single bit of doubt, then he doesn't belong here. And I know everybody's confident.
All right. That was Chris Bosh talking after the game. Like we mentioned earlier, no teams come back from 3-1 deficit in the NBA Finals to win the series, and the Heat would have to make history. They've made their own version of history. They've been historically good offensively at times, even this year. Obviously, we know what LeBron James has done, four-time MVP, a couple times NBA Finals MVP. I mean, he's got the pedigree to be able to sort of buck a historic trend. However, it's going to take probably his most impressive stretch of games ever, LeBron James, for him to come back and win this series. So let's start with let's just assume they can't make that history. Okay, let's assume that the Heat goes down. Let's start with them first. What does that do to stain, if at all, LeBron's legacy? Because now you're talking about a guy who's 2-3 in finals appearances, which is, it's pretty impressive that he's been to 5 already. But he would be 2-3, and we all know that everybody's going to start comparing to MJ, and he never lost the finals, blah blah blah. What does this do to the view of LeBron James? Not just because of the finals loss again, but because basically since the start of Game 3, he's been outplayed by Kawhi Leonard, who hasn't even made an All-Star game yet in his career. How does this, if at all, alter the view of LeBron James?
Well, I don't think it alters it that much for true basketball minds. Is the fact that you say that he's been outplayed by Kawhi Leonard in 2 games. I beg to differ on that, only from the standpoint that Kawhi has Tim, Tony, and Manu on the floor as well, whereas LeBron, he doesn't have guys that are performing at a level where it allows him to even be more special. But he's still shooting well over 50% from the field, and it's unfortunate that this is what will always be said about him, whether he wins it or the fact that he's been there 4 years in a row. It's always going to be a question. I don't think it does anything to his legacy for the true basketball minds, because they understand all the things that he goes through and the way that this team was built. He's continued to do his part, and it's just unfortunate that others haven't been able to capitalize on the things that he's creating for them.
All right, well, what about Dwayne Wade here? Because, for a couple of years we've been saying he's been on the decline because of his knees. If you look at his career, he started off with a surprising rookie year, and I think everybody recognized how good he was. And then he just became, one of the best shooting guards in the league for basically a 4 or 5 year stretch, if not the best shooting guard. And then, he had that 1 year where he led the league in scoring in 2008, 2009. So we're talking about a span of about, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 7 years where he was at the top of his game. One of those years being pretty bad. He only played 51 games. That was a 15-win Heat season. That was kind of a throwaway year. So within that stretch, you're talking, like 6, 7 just phenomenal seasons. And now this year, last few years, he's been more efficient, but hasn't been the same type of explosive player. Have we seen, do you think, the end of the idea of Dwayne Wade as a superstar in this league? Is it no longer an automatic that he even makes, an all-star game in the future? Like, what is it? It seems kind of sad to watch this happen because he doesn't have the explosion. Obviously during the regular season, sat out a bunch of games, only played, 54 games this regular season. How do you view Dwayne Wade now in terms of what, his entire basketball career and then what he has left?
Well, I mean, I still view him as a solid player, is he? But it's going to take him to make the necessary changes body-wise, as Tim Duncan did. You know, when Tim stopped being the man, and how could he affect the game and still be a person on the floor that opponents had to contend with? So whether that's healing, whether that's going on the diet, whether it's changing his diet,
what did Tim do? What did Tim do to change who he was, to change his body?
Part of it was his diet. Is he lost
okay.
a lot of weight, and he changed his diet as far as how he eats. He no longer. We were both eating sushi for lunch one time, and I just said, this is pitiful. We used to eat steaks, French fries, and all this other stuff, but at the same time, we were burning a lot of that stuff off during the course of the game. And as you get older, you got to change things up. You can't do things the way you used to. And when you look at Dwayne's face right now, it kind of looks puffy. And I say puffy from the standpoint like he's not in the best of shape right now. Due to the fact that he can't probably, get out there and run like he would like to without dealing with pain or what have you. So I think it's more about him maybe getting more into, that mid-range stuff and not necessarily coming off of or trying to create a lot of his shots, but doing things in a way where he can still be efficient, even though he's not giving you that flash type of play.
Oh, so you think basically his answer has been, well, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to work in the post, and that way, he can sort of change his game up that way. You think he needs to trim down? You think he needs to lean down? Because I've heard other people say the same. Like, it wouldn't be you wouldn't be the first person to say it. And you know how Pat Riley is. I mean, that's what Pat Riley's answer is when you get older, right? You get leaner.
Yeah, you got to, because now you're talking about somebody who's had knee problems, Izzy, and carrying all that weight on those knees, and you're not as young as you used to be. Your explosion isn't there. A lot of it has to do with carrying that weight. So I really believe that if he loses weight, Izzy, he might be able to get back some of that explosion where he could be a lot more than what he is right now.
How much do you think? Like, given his body type, his size, are we talking 10 pounds? Are we talking more than that? Like, what's a significant amount?
15 to 20 pounds, Izzy. 15 to 20 pounds for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Because, actually, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it adds to his longevity in the game and also allows him to be productive as he moves forward, instead of being a player that can easily be guarded. Like, he was searching for fouls yesterday when he went to the basket, and that was all predicated because he missed some bunnies. So, you can still play your game even though you're not what you used to be, but you can still be effective.
He's a proud guy. It's going to be hard to convince him that that's the way he should go. He famously doesn't like vegetables, and he never really ate fish until recently. So it's going to take a lot to get him to go there. But, given that he just went an entire season basically working with Tim Grover and feeling good, and then it still ends up this way, I'm guessing even he might see the light at some point. But we'll see what happens there. We talked about Chris Bosh already in terms of how he should be viewed necessarily by the Heat. So we won't rehash that. But just the last thing on the Heat before we get to the Spurs, what about the supporting cast? I mean, it's obvious they need to get younger, right? I mean, I think Eric Spoelstra would like that. He would have more options, more ability to change up the game. Is it as simple as getting younger, or do you think, and this whole idea, I haven't talked with you about it yet, of them bringing in a Carmelo Anthony, for example. Do you need to get younger and adjust around LeBron, or do you need LeBron to get another guy of that caliber, of a Melo caliber?
I think it's important to get younger, kind of like the Spurs did. You have a younger nucleus around the big three. I think you surround the guys that you have, but you just get them with some younger individuals that can kind of fit into your system. When you get that, then I think it allows the big three, your foundation, to be effective. But at the same time, you're getting younger, and you're not so dependent upon, your big three, and you're able to utilize some of your other assets, kind of like San Antonio is doing with Patty Mills and Boris Diaw.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly here, I mean, we can talk all day about the legacy of Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich. You know them quite well. How badly do they want this? And secondly, just what does it do to, I mean, where does Tim Duncan rank in your view in terms of all-time players if he gets his 5th ring? And I think we all recognize Popovich as one of the best coaches of all time.
Yeah, but I think that Tim will still go down, even if he didn't get the ring, as the best power forward in the game.
What about the best since Michael Jordan? Like, the conversation is, you know, Kobe and then LeBron trying to get there. Basically, the best since Jordan. You can make the argument it's Tim Duncan easily, right?
Yeah, you definitely could. I mean, you look at what he's been able to do as well, Izzy. I mean, the team continuing in playoffs and the 50-plus win seasons and, you know, all the things that it's so funny that you say that, things that weren't publicized so much, but, you know, because of the market and because of the type of individual he is, it leads to all the questions of, wow, look at what he's truly accomplished since Michael Jordan has been in the league.
Yeah, you look at just comparing him with LeBron James, regular season MVPs since Jordan. Well, Duncan has 2, James has 4. Finals points per game, LeBron 24 points per game, Duncan 21 points per game. Finals MVPs, Duncan has 3, James has 2, Duncan might get a 4th. And in the series head-to-head in the finals, that would be, if Duncan goes on to win this, he will have beaten LeBron, who's, you know, trying to be better than MJ, beaten LeBron 2 out of 3 times. So it's hard to argue that Tim Duncan has that sort of legacy sort of wrapped up, that mythical title sort of wrapped up if he wins this series. And frankly, there's no guarantee he won't win it again next year because they're still in place to be a really, 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 really good team next year and possibly, NBA title favorites. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast for Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. Thanks for listening, and we might have a season wrap-up on Monday if the Spurs can wrap up this series. We'll see how that plays out in Game 5. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again Monday.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.